Hello everyone. Today our group will explain about natural approach. And before we start to explain about what is natural approach, I will start to introduce ourselves. Start with me. I'm Ivanka Artika with ID number 136, and then my friend Aulia Marta Rismaya with ID number 144. And then the last but not least is Gitaya Fajar Khoirunnisa with ID number 155. And then the first thing, definition, will be explained by Gitaya.
Okay, before we to the definition, in the early 1970s, a new interdisciplinary research field second language acquisition emerged in the United States. And then several years passed with the various changes. And in 1983, Terrell and Crescent launched the book with the title The Natural Approach Language Acquisition in the Classroom, making the formal establishment of the teaching method. Christian and Terrell have identified a natural approach with what they call traditional approaches to the language teaching. Traditional approach are defined as based on the use of language in communication situation without a resource to the native language. So, we can conclude that the natural approach is an educational method for teaching language that emphasizes meaningful communication and acquisition of language skills in naturalistic manner. And the natural approach is designed to help the beginner to become the intermediate because the learning process focus on the communication skill and language exposure before rules and grammar, similar to how you learn your first language. And the next is four basic principles. The first stage is pre-production. This stage is essentially their listening and reading some context clue. And the next stage is early production, is when the babies start uttering their first word, phrases, and simple sentences. The third stage is speech emergence, is when the child will transform their singular word and short phrases into lengthier one. And the last stage is intermediate fluency, is the child when already can communicate with perfectly decent grammar naturally.
The next one is characteristic of the natural approaches will be explained by Maya.
Okay, for the characteristic of the natural approach, the first point is about input. This means the language that learner receive, like sentence, expression, or conversation. In a natural approach, input should not only be a lot, but also meaningful and easy to understand. The second point is comprehension. At the beginning, the focus is on understanding, not on grammar rules. Learner don't need to analyze the rules to get the meaning. Understanding always comes first before they can start speaking. The last point is communication. Here, the focus is on real communication, not grammar lessons. Learners are exposed to meaningful interaction so they can naturally build their own sentence over time.
And then the next one is theory of language and learning of natural approach that will be explained by me. So the first one is the theory of language. Crescent and Terrell view the communication as the primary function of language and adapt to a communication uh, approach to language teaching, focusing on teaching communicative abilities rather than sterile language structure. And then for the theory of learning, there are five hypotheses that underlie the natural approach as a base. So the first one is the acquisition or learning hypothesis. In here, it suggests that adults can acquire their foreign language or second language as naturally as they are do in their child when they are a child acquiring their first language. And the second one is the natural order hypothesis. In here, it tells that even though everyone study differently, the way they acquire language construct is roughly the same. And then the third one is the monitoring hypothesis. In here, the monitoring role of explicit knowledge is difficult to apply in the natural language communication environment. And then the fourth one is the input hypothesis. In here, it explains the relationship between what the learner is exposed to of a language and their acquisition of the language. And it suggests that people acquire language best by understanding input that is slightly higher than their current level, or what Gerson refers to as I plus 1 formula. And then the last one is the affective filter hypothesis. In here, it tells how the learner's state of emotion can influence their progress of language acquisition, and it emphasizes the importance of openly want to learn the language. And then we move on to advantages and disadvantages of the natural approach that will be explained by Maya.
The natural approach has several advantages. First, it focuses on communication, so learner use the language in real situation. Second, it gives immersion in the language, helping learner pick it up more naturally. It also reduces anxiety because there is less pressure on grammar. Finally, it can improve pronunciation through lots of listening and speaking exposure. However, there are also some disadvantages. This approach pays less attention to grammar and syntax. Without clear structure, some learner may lose motivation. It may not suit learners who prefer explicit rules and instruction. It is also harder to practice speaking and get feedback without a teacher. Lastly, progress can be difficult to measure without standardized tests. Next, for the conclusion, the natural approach draws on how learners naturally acquire both first and second language in non-formal settings. It emphasizes comprehensible input and meaningful communication rather than strict grammar order, aligning with the view that language can be effectively learned without following grammar step by step. One of its strengths is the flexibility to integrate techniques from various methods while maintaining its focus on naturalistic language use. However, despite its advantage, the natural approach may not always suit every teaching context. So, in practice, it is important to adapt and balance its use rather than fully adapt or completely reject it.
That's all from us. Thank you very much for your attention.